Hello, and welcome to The Powers in You. Today I have an amazing guest, Lynn K. Russell, and she is an author of a book called The Wonders of You, What Near-Death Experience Tells You About Yourself. And she has heard over 2,500 cases of near-death experiences. So she was just amazing to talk to. Now I want to share her with you. And there she is. Lynn, how are you doing today?
I'm wonderful. Thank you.
We talked earlier, and this work that you have done is absolutely amazing. Your book is in its second edition.
Yes, that's right.
Tell us a little bit about just how you got there and all about, this.
Sure. Well, it starts back when I was a little girl. My grandfather died. And so that made me realize that everybody dies, that I was going to die. And that really scared me. I was frightened. And of course, I didn't want to die. So I went to my mom, but my mom was an atheist. And so I asked her, what happens when you die? And she said, nothing, you just disappear. And that was not the right answer. That terrified me. And so that I laid in bed at night for years, literally years and years, terrified of death. And how was I going to get out of it? I couldn't. And another thing I did was I was very curious, because I was raised in an atheist home. So I was very curious about spirituality and religions, and maybe they had some answers that I couldn't find, that my parents didn't know. And so I started studying all kinds of religions of the world. And I studied how they got started and then how they got to be where they are today. And so that was a lot of what I was doing with myself. And that started around 16. So that's over 66 years ago. And I didn't just stick with the religions, because as soon as I would hear anybody talk about a new philosophy or a way of seeing things, I wanted to know more and more and more about it. And so that's what I did for all these years. And then I had the opportunity after I retired. I was a family counselor, and I retired. And when I retired, I had the opportunity to research on near-death experiences with Dr. Jeffery Long for his book. And so I just jumped at it. That was fantastic. What an opportunity. And so that's what I did. That's how I got the 2,500 near-death cases, is that I just kept going. And even after the research finished, I still kept going, because I was learning not so much what happened to the people, but the deeper messages, the deeper learning, spiritual learning that was coming back from these people, and how it was going to help and change the world. And so that was what my book was about, the first one. And then it went very, very well. It was very well received. And so then I was asked to do a second book, and I did. And the second book has quite a bit of different information in it. I've concentrated in the beginning of the book on near-death experiences, and the second half of the book is concentrating on consciousness, because one of the other things that I did with my life was to research and study science, particularly cosmology and quantum physics. I just was fascinated with what they were learning about it, things, and oh wow, that was just fascinating. So that's where the consciousness comes from. I talk about quantum physics and how it brings out our consciousness and shows us that is our reality. So that's what's in this second book.
Wow. What is the name of the second book?
It's the same name.
It's the same
second edition, yeah.
Second
the same.
edition. Okay, so the wonders of you and what near-death experience tells you about yourself.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
when you talk about quantum physics, I talk about quantum mechanics, which is the
Well,
fundamental existence.
yeah, you're right. I probably should call it
No.
quantum theory or quantum mechanics, or yeah, it's the same thing.
And the God particle. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah, and I find it fascinating. And the reason I started to think about that is because I wanted to reach people that maybe thought the spiritual aspect of it was too woo-woo. So I tried to back up 90, I probably about 90% of it is backed up by science.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes. And that's my next book too. I have another book that's just finishing up the last touches, and then it'll go to a publisher. And it's all science. It's spiritual science. That's what it is.
Oh.
Yeah, and it's going to be called Your Quantum Consciousness.
Oh, I love that. I love that. Oh,
but that's in the future.
we're going to do another interview.
Yes.
So when we talked previously, I told you that I had this out of body experience, that I was in a boating accident and I woke up under the water and my body was here. And I didn't think to look at myself. As far as I knew, I was invisible. And then I told you that I had a download of information, all kinds of things, like a movie of, languages and mathematics and art and things that I didn't even know what they were. And then, I got this message where I saw an opening where there was a light. And then they said to me, you have to go back in your body because your body will no longer survive. And so I said, what do I do? And they said, it's up to you. We're not going to tell you. And so I just put my head back in and I came above the water. And I had been under probably about 15 minutes. And people don't know that. They don't believe that I could have sustained, but I did. And I don't know. But they had been searching for me 20 minutes on the lake and they couldn't find me. And this was back in, I think the late 70s, and I was in a big lake. So you had, at the time, you said to me, this said something about me. And that goes into what near-death experiences tell you about yourself. So could you expand on that? Like with this particular instance, what did that?
Well, what you experienced, what you experienced was one aspect of the death experience. And I don't use the word near as much as I try hard not to, because it's disqualifying. I think it says, well, it's not really an experience, you didn't really die. So I like to just use that death experience.
Okay.
People who've had death experiences, that is one of the big elements, is that they have this feeling of all knowledge, like every bit of knowledge that there is in the universe just pours into them, and there's no questions left to ask. Sometimes that doesn't happen spontaneously like it has with you. Sometimes they ask a question and then it comes, and there's literally no questions left for them to ask.
Right. And I know that when I was out of my body, I felt pure bliss. I felt, and I describe it as being in room temperature jello, just floating, like there's no, and it's bliss. There's no encroachment of the physical. There's no pain, no anything. You're just pure bliss.
Yeah. And one of the very first things that happens is that you let go of the material immediately, so that you see, some people see their body there and it means nothing to them.
Yes.
Care less. Yeah.
Exactly. When I saw it, I wasn't alarmed. I just looked over it and saw it. And
Yep.
I was like, I had no sense of any remorse or feeling or anything.
Yes. Yes. Yes.
Yes,
That's very common. Yeah.
yeah,
Interesting.
right. And
Yeah.
what do you say to, there's always, and there's a lot of medical professionals that are naysayers that say, oh, this is just like um, a, what do you call it?
The brain breaking down, or the chemicals,
Yeah,
or
like
drugs and
dream,
things like that.
like a dream state. So they won't give it its proper dues.
Yes. 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 There's a lot of people who want to disqualify it, either hallucinations or drugs or whatever. But I in my books I talk about that quite extensively. There are a number of things that, if you just think about it, for the first place, um, people who die come back with information they could not possibly know, and they will meet relatives that they've never even seen, like grandfathers or grandparents. They come back with information about someone who has died at the same time that they died, but nobody else knew that that person had died yet. And they find out later that, oh, yeah, that person did die. Um, they also come back with information about, like, if the parent had a miscarriage, or not a miscarriage, but a terminated pregnancy, or the child died at birth. Um, they often don't tell the little baby, or they wouldn't tell the next child. But the child will come back and say, or the person, whoever has had the death experience, will come back and say, I met my brother or my sister or whatever. Now, how did they even know about that? Um, the other thing is, so that's the logistics kind of thing, and they also can tell, they know what we're thinking and what we're doing, even though their body is lying on a slab somewhere, but or in an operating room or whatever. But and so how do they know what somebody in another house miles away is thinking or what's doing? And they do know that. Anita Morjani talks about her brother was coming because she was very, very ill. And so they took her to the hospital, and she was dying as she was walking into or not walking, being rolled into the hospital. Um, and so, but her brother was coming on a plane, and she knew it. She saw him on the plane coming. So how did her body know that? I mean, her body's on a bed somewhere, you know. Um, that's those kind of things. But what really convinced me, was the length of time that people are dead for, because some people are dead 14 hours or more. Um, and for example, they wake up in the morgue in the state of rigor mortis, which is 12 to 14 hours for it to set in. They also wake up in the morgue, and they can't breathe, they can't move, they're alive, and obviously, but they can't even, they can move their eyeballs, and that's about all. Like, their body is stiff, and so they can't signal anybody to say, hey, I'm here. And so it's a bit of a problem. So, but the thing is that all the organs, they've been pronounced dead and sent to the morgue. Number two, they have, all their organs have shut down and stopped for 12, 14 hours. And then they wake back up again. And that has to be something that is not the brain breaking down, or the chemicals, or hallucinations, or whatever. It has to be beyond that for me.
So you interviewed people that have been pronounced dead in the morgue?
Yeah, yeah. I didn't interview them. They sent their stories to NDERF, which was Dr. Long's website, And then I would read their stories and then I would break it apart. The odd person I did talk to several, but that was the exception rather than the rule.
So
But yeah, I talked to people who were gone for 14, 12, 14.
they wake up in the morgue and they alert whoever is going to do, either the autopsy or the whatever.
Yeah.
And they
Well, the autopsies usually haven't started. There's only one person that claims to wake up just as they were beginning to do the autopsy. And the problem with his story is that there's no records. It was in Russia, and so there was no records to.
Okay, but the people that you've gotten several people that were in the morgue, and
Yes.
What happened?
And there's records. They're all records.
And
all the hospital records are there saying that she died or he died, and that they were put to the morgue, and that they returned.
And so they were in the morgue, and they wake up, and then the people find them, and they're awake.
Yeah, yes. Usually, what happens is that one person, they noticed that she was awake because she was crying, and so the tears, and so the son, the brother-in-law, said to the attendant, "Well, do corpses cry?" And so the attendant jumped and got, so that was one. The other one was someone who rolled his eyes to show, because the attendant was right by him, so he kept rolling his eyes until they paid attention and noticed that he was moving his eyes. And yeah, so but so people, there is one story that is blow your mind. This one, the man was dead for 29 hours. That's over a day, and came back. And it's all recorded. All recorded.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my 15 minutes underwater is nothing.
No, it is. No, it isn't the length of time.
No, the fact that people say, oh, it's impossible for you to have been under the water 15 minutes. And I was.
Yeah, yes, you were. Yeah, I believe you.
And so people say, oh, that's impossible because your body would have died. So here you have people.
I did die. That's true.
But I came back.
Yeah, so exactly.
You have people that have been dead for 12, 14 hours and they come back to life. The body is intact.
Yes, exactly.
So
it's very painful. They say that it's extremely painful because they have to get their blood rolling again.
Right.
And that's very hard. And so it's quite a painful experience.
I want to bring up something about pain. First, you said, Dr. Long, what's NEDRF?
Oh, Near Death Experience Research Foundation.
Okay. One thing that I noticed, and I had read about this, that the second that you die, so for example, when I went through this inner tube, I felt excruciating pain for a second.
Oh.
I was out of body. And I had read somewhere where feel it for a nanosecond and then you're gone.
No.
Something to that effect.
Yeah, no, you are an exception that you felt pain. Very, very few people feel any pain at all.
I mean, it was a nanosecond. I could feel as my body was going through, I think my neck had been broken or something.
Yeah.
I felt excruciating pain. It was a second of it. And then
and that's the exception. Most people don't feel pain at all. Leaving the body is almost as smooth as walking through a doorway, except even easier because you don't have to walk. You just float.
It might have been the time right before I left the body. And so
it could have been.
That's where I was still in the physical and I felt the second.
And your lungs would be in pain. Your lungs would be feeling pain because it wants to breathe.
Yeah, so I was out before I went under.
Yeah.
out at the time I went into the, yeah. So yeah, I'm so blown away. And so scientifically, you talked about how are we putting that together scientifically that it actually happens? Do you have a scientific?
Well, I think we need way more study. I mean, we're just getting snippets here and there. Dr. Long did the research. Well, he wrote about the research that I did. And there's many doctors that have done researches on near death, but each one looks at this piece and this piece, and you know, we're not getting a whole, and we need to have way, way more research, and don't close the door and say, oh, well, that's what it is, because proper study done on these cases that are long-term death experiences. And I would, because they're already recorded in the hospitals.
Right.
And so, I want to see what, and another thing is with your experience, 15 minutes, very often time is not relevant on the other side at all. There's no time. And so you can be gone for 15 minutes and feel like you were gone for 5 seconds. And you could be gone for 15 minutes and feel like you've been gone a year and a half, you know? So it's there is no black and white
Right.
about it.
Yeah. And this gives me kind of a gratification because, when you're called a liar, well, that's not true. And I'm like, well, it is.
Yeah.
Some type of gratification that indeed would be possible.
Yeah, right.
Thank you for giving us this information. You're helping expand our consciousness, something that we need. So,
well, thank you. That's what I want to do.
Yeah, well, that's what you're doing. All right. I thank you so much.